Coaches, it's the off season for most of you all. We are approaching the off season. Many of you are in that off season now or very close. What do you do with it? Are you one of those who just drifts off and forgets about football until next November? Oh, sorry, this November or next January? Do you drift off to another sport even or do something unrelated to sport? Is rugby league something that you pick up and drop off when it suits you? And that's fine. Those kind of options are fine, particularly from a mental health point of view. You know, you may just enjoy rugby league for what it is, but I bet you want to get better at it, don't you? It's fine from a relaxation and a living life point of view, but this podcast exists to make better coaches, to grow coaches, to motivate coaches and to improve coaches. So forgive me if I don't subscribe to that switching off from the sport for too long theory. Because if you do the whole detachment thing until football comes around again, be it November or January next year, you'll just be the same coach that you were this year and every other year. You'll be no better. You'll be better a little bit, I suppose, in terms of experience, but the reality is it'll just be an incremental improvement. And you'll start your pre-season doing the same old tired things, and your players will pick up on it, and so will people at your club. You might be happy with that. Maybe you won the grand final this year, or maybe you're in the grand final this week, and you're going to pat yourself on the back and fall in love with yourself as a coach because you got to the grand final. But human nature is to get bored with the same old tired stuff, guys. And as a coach, you have to keep evolving. And if you're standing still, others will be preparing to take over you. It's also human nature that if you're getting beaten, to want to do something about it. If you're coaching kids during the off season, many of them will grow and mature quicker than you can even imagine in ways that will shock you. And the disciplined kid, an attentive kid of 2024 might be the disruptive kid and the kid with attitude in 2025, the bored kid. The child of 2024 might be the young adult of 2025. The drills you did in 2024 will be beneath that kid in 2025. I see that a lot, particularly the further I go out from the city. Players of a certain age seem to think they're beyond core skills, etc. That's another conversation for another day. But that is a thought that players have. If you're still teaching them and coaching them what you did in under 10s, they're going to be fed up of you. And so many of us coaches, our journey in the game is taking a team from under 6s because your son or daughter is in it. And you move up through that side with that side. And you've got to keep reinventing yourself or the players will get fed up of you. I always think as the off season, as the golden time to grow and the most important time for a coach. It's something I really enjoy. You're away from the grind. You're away from what I call the rugby league treadmill. And you think, how much can you grow as a coach if all you are doing is preparing for a game, spending time at the game, win, lose, or draw, you process the game after it. Let's say you got beat, you process it for longer. And then Monday you're off to work, and then Monday night you might think a little bit about training, but then you're fielding all your calls about players that are unavailable, injured, gone to see a physio, or won't go and see a physio and they're out for 4 weeks. And then Tuesday arrives and you thought you were going to get 20 players, but you've got 10. And you start to get frustrated. And then everything that happens at a club, the white noise of a club gets in your head. Then Wednesday, you spend some time with your family. Thursday, you train again. It's a team run through. Friday, you have a couple of beers. And then Saturday, you're playing. Where's the time to improve as a coach? I mentored a coach this year from round 3 of his competition, and we literally were just in that treadmill constantly. Plan, do, review didn't really happen. It was, right, what have you got to go on the field this weekend? And consider that person there, consider that person there. Do this with your training, do that with your training. During the off-season, players spend time training, getting stronger, fitter, more skilled and faster. So if players do it, why shouldn't us coaches do it as well? Spend time on ourselves to make us coach better, teach better, and manage better. If you don't do this, you will get left behind. There's no two ways about that. And again, I'm preaching to all the coaches who want to get better, okay? Personally, I always give myself a fortnight or 3-4 weeks after a season where I don't think about rugby league. Depends how intense the season has been. And then I spend the pre-Christmas period planning my study. So I study things that are nothing to do with rugby league for a period, and then I go more sports related. Now, this doesn't change if my pre-season starts in November, and my pre-season before November will always be game-based, where the players do a lot of running around, playing with the ball, developing some skills, and getting some cardiovascular improvements, because after Christmas is when the real stuff kicks in. I base my pre-season study or my off-season study around reading, which works for me, really works for me. In the 2, 3, or 4 weeks where I don't want to do anything football related, I would read everything that isn't sports or politics, leadership, business, history. And I often read things about history, and I often find during that time something historically that can teach me about a theme I can give to my players. And I've told you before about things like the Rumble in the Jungle, Muhammad Ali and George Foreman, the story of the Kenyan runners, the story of St. Paul's Cathedral during World War II, and Winston Churchill's approach to preserving it. I've told you, I think, the story of the Viet Cong guerrilla warfare in the Vietnam War, where they put buckets of urine in trees because they understood the Americans had technology that detected human urine. So the Americans spent millions of dollars bombing trees with buckets of piss, not people. That helped me with something to discuss with my players about the importance of subterfuge, of decoys. If you read Sun Tzu's Art of War, there are so many things in there that you can turn into a rugby league theme. And can you imagine how many lessons from history there are that can help and inspire us with rugby league? There is so many out there. And I certainly haven't found them all. And then after that period, I go specific and I read specifically about training methods. So even though I am not an S&C coach, I want to be able to talk to my S&C coach about S&C stuff. And I want him or her to know that they can't pull the wool over my eyes, or that they can have a proper conversation with me. I want to know the latest on sports physiology, which is strength and conditioning. I want to know the latest on sports psychology. I've always used sports psychology myself as a coach. So rather than using a psychologist, I have tried to be the sports psychologist myself. And that has helped me with my messaging and making my messaging clear and concise to players, and the repetition and the amount of times I repeated that message. I always study teaching methods and the art of teaching and learning, and the latest on how people learn, particularly in this era of learning difficulties. That is all grouped in the term called pedagogy. And I also constantly look up team building ideas. Basically, particularly if you're working with juniors, you can't take them out on a drinking spree. So I always look at different team building ideas, and there are other ways of doing that don't involve going to a bar. And then during that period in the off season, I would bounce between rugby league, other sports, and non-sport related things. And I've got to be honest, there was that many not involved. Sorry, much of what I read didn't involve rugby league. It was all other sports. Most of my bookshelves are other sports, not rugby league, because there's not that much for rugby league coaches. And that motivated me to start Rugby League Coach in 2018, rugbyleaguecoach.com.au, that is. I often study the game for different trends. So not just the NRL, I study the lower grades, but in particular, I'm keen on looking at my own competition if I'm going for the second or third season in that competition, because you find trends in there that mean you will win games or lose games if you do certain things. And one year in particular, I got it down to only 3 ways my team could lose a game in the specific competition that they were in. If I remember rightly, it was your completion rate had to be a certain percentage. If it was any lower than that, we were at risk. Our tackle effectiveness needed to be over a certain percentage, and our penalty score had to be down. If they covered all those areas, they were fine. So again, what are you going to do during this off season, guys? Obviously, I keep mentioning the YouTube channel Rugby League Coach, and that's free. And you can go on rugbyleaguecoach.com.au/coach and see if any of those ideas take your fancy. 2 years ago, we at Rugby League Coach stepped up our efforts to mentor coaches, and you may have heard of the Coach Mentor Program or programs. The results have quite simply been outstanding, and the programs include online and in-person work at clubs. So every year I've got more and more clubs asking me to come out, do 2 or 3 sessions with coaches, either in person or online. And then they get access to rugbyleaguecoach.com.au for all their coaches. So there's plenty of that going on. But of course, individual coaches get one-on-one mentoring online and in person. And in the last couple of years, the results have been quite impressive, to say the least. We've had 6 grand final wins across 2 years in USA, England, New Zealand, and Australia. So that's not bad at all. Several undefeated representative campaigns. There was one only at the weekend, actually. A coach I mentor coached a rep weekend and didn't concede a try, and he was made up. There's 3 competition runners up listed in all those teams as well in 2 years, from the last 2 years with the Coach Mentor Program. I guess the best statistic I can give you that every single one of the teams or clubs that we get involved with, or the individuals, they improve, they get better. But 87.5% of those have coached teams that have finished in the top 3 of their competition, which I find the most intriguing stat. What we do on this program is, let's say I met you as a coach right now. I'll do what I call a diagnostic with you in the first 2 or 3 weeks, where I ask you a series of questions, and we then have a look at what you are like as a coach. And then I've got to be honest, the system I've developed is probably 70-80% on the money when I do meet these coaches in person or watch videos of them and watch them coach. I've got most of it down pat from this diagnostic. And then we put in a plan for the coach on what they need to improve on. And then we plan the pre-season in real detail. Now, the process we take with all your planning is, I want it so that you can turn up at training when you've been to work, you've had no time to think of your coaching, you can literally open up your plan and you know exactly what you're doing that night. You can also share it with your assistants, and there's also enough wiggle room in there so that you can put in your own things that are needed at the time as well. So the basic theory is, if you're ever run over by a bus, this piece of paper or this Word document or this Excel document means that your assistants can take over and your team will still progress. And then we tend to move into